All right, it's 6 p.m. I will call our regular committee of the whole meeting of Monday, May 1st, 2023 to order. I'm Councillor Duncan. I'm sitting in the chair as acting mayor tonight. Councillors Novak, Rentoul, Garnett, and Mayor McNeil Smith are in the chambers with me. Councillors Duck and O'Keefe are absent tonight. I will start with, the territorial acknowledgement. Acknowledge that we are on the traditional territories of the Wasanish people. Haishksiam. Thank you for sharing your territory with us, and may we all learn to live in a good way together. I will look for a motion approving the agenda.
So move. Second.
Okay, I'll call a question. All in favor? Or I guess any edits? No? I'll call a question. All in favor? Okay, approved. We have 3 public participations tonight, but we have no public in the chambers. Because we have development applications and the 2 public who are in the chambers are speaking to those, I'm not necessarily going to assume that they're going to come forward for the regular public participation. I guess, can we make a motion to just go past that public participation because there's nobody else but the applicants here?
Thank you. Just through you, chair, to staff. Do we need to pass a motion, or can we just proceed?
No. Okay.
Okay, very good.
All right, then. I will go straight to approval of the minutes then. We'll look for an approval of, there's a motion regarding the regular committee of the whole of March 20th.
So moved.
Okay, seconder?
Second.
Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, motion approved unanimously. And we have no presentations except for the development applications. So we will move to item 7A, which is development variance permit number DV100335 for 2356 and 2363 Orchard Avenue and 9658 and 96626 6th Street to reduce the minimum required setback for heat pumps in order to allow installation of heat pumps for 4 single-family dwellings. And we have a presentation from the applicant, Lindsay Saborin, who is here in the chamber with us. Yeah, welcome. Yeah.
I remember all those addresses. It's very simple presentation. Perfect. So I'm here tonight.
Chair, just a point. If you could just push your microphone there.
Button. There we go. Basically asking to locate our heat pumps on the interior side of the 4 houses in our development. In order to do so, we need a variance to the heat pump bylaw. So a few reasons why we want to locate them on the interior sidelines. Most importantly, it keeps them hidden from visual sight from the other surrounding existing neighbors in the area. For both visual appeal and as well as any minor noise. As well, it keeps them away from the patios that are located in the back of all 4 homes and away from the bedrooms of the homes that are being built. Therefore, already if they were located in the back patios, there's already limited outdoor space. So we're just really looking to maximize that for the future homeowners. And it also puts all the servicing, just for convenience sake, on one side of the house. So I know the gas meter's there and a few other things. So as the houses sit currently, there's already less than 3 meters of side property, 3 meters back from the side property lines. Therefore, locating the heat pumps on the side requires the variance to the permit. In order to make the houses, like I said, more visually appealing in the neighborhood and desirable for the owners, the future owners, we propose locating them in the interior sides. And there still would be ample room, as we've already started measuring out, for fences on all of the property lines to define all 4 houses. So there still would be ample room for that. And we feel this is, like we said, the most visually appealing, convenient, and allowing just the future homeowners to have as much outdoor living space as possible. So thank you for your review and consideration. Oh, and I didn't even change the slide. In addition to sort of what I just stated, the numbers, because there's a lot of numbers on this, that I've circled are the setbacks. So from the side, so there's the 4 properties. The green are the location of where we're recommending or proposing the heat pumps be located. So as mentioned, they're away from the back patios. They're hidden on the interior sidelines, so they're away from any visual in the neighborhood and away from the bedrooms of all 4 of the homes. So that's what we're proposing.
Thank you. Now, at this point, normally we'd go for public participation from the audience and see if anyone in the public had questions first. Mr. Timothy, did you have any questions of this applicant before I go to? No. That's good. Okay. Then I will look to questions from the committee. Mr. Garnett.
Thank you, Chair. I have 3. So when the project first started, I remember when this project came forward last term, in the design phase of it, were you aware of the zoning bylaw with regards to meet the setback?
That's a great question. I was unfortunately not involved in that stage, and that's why they've sent me in now to fix up their mess, because it was all the professionals. No, all things aside, I believe I'm not totally clear if it's supposed to be in the development permit phase or the building permit phase. But my understanding is it wasn't included in either of those, and I think it's this is a bit of a unusual situation, because rarely do you run into 3-meter side setbacks anyways. Because our builder Garrett Wakefield, who's quite experienced in this, he said he's never run into this before, because you always have room for a heat pump. A heat pump's 13 inches. It needs about 1 meter of space around. You never get close to that. But because there were already variances in place for where the houses were going to be positioned, that part was, I guess, overlooked or not included in the original development permit.
Okay, that just sort of plays into my other question,
Yeah.
which was when I was looking at it and looking back at when this came to us, and you have this open space, or as I like to call it, a blank slate where you can build whatever you want. I was trying to figure out why they wouldn't have designed the homes with the heat pump locations in mind in the first place. Mm-hmm. And you've sort of spoken to that. So my next question, if I may, I do a little bit of sneaking around on our development active page. I like to see what's coming down the pipe. So I already knew this was coming at some point. So I'd already visited the site. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious as to why, when you're requesting a variance for these locations, why it's already roughed in and wired. Like I guess I'm kind of mulling around the idea of, like, if you're asking for something and you're first building the homes, why you would go to that length already, given that approval hasn't been given?
It's a great question. I also asked Garrett this as well. And I guess my understanding from that is, if we were to have to relocate it, he told me that it's simply running a wire somewhere else. So we can still have the rough in where it is. And then it would just be simply, say for example, if we want to locate them on the back patio, it would just be running a wire from where they're already roughed in.
Okay, fair enough answer. And the last one, Chair, thank you. In the letter of rationale from Mr. Wakefield, he mentions that these equipment are rated at a dB of 51. Mm-hmm. So is that like that's as low as they'll go for sound? Like, will they go lower, or 51's like is the bottom? My
understanding is I would say the quietest.
Yeah.
So my understanding is they chose these because they were on the quieter side, because we have them located so close to the homes. We wanted something that was going to be as quiet as possible.
Okay, so if I may, Chair, and this is going to be through you to staff in relation to this. Last week we just passed 3 readings to change our noise bylaw for heat pumps, 55 decibels at night in the day and 45 at night. So if these are rating at 51, are we essentially allowing for heat pumps that will be in contravention of a bylaw that we might shortly be adopting? And if that's the case, can we request noise attenuation?
Sure. Through the chair to Councillor Garnett, we would have to look into the specifications for these specific heat pumps. The variance being requested it doesn't force the property owner to purchase this model of heat pump. They could choose a different model that would have a different decibel rating. And we would have to look at the manufacturer's specifications to see if that decibel of 51 is the loudest or the quietest, or if that's directly beside the unit or right at property line. There's a lot of variables in here, so I don't think that it would be a concern, and they could choose a different model if they do find that it violates Sydney's bylaw, which has not yet been adopted.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I'm trying to be forward thinking in terms of when people actually do occupy the homes and avoid headaches for staff at some point in the future. So
That's a great
thank you.
point.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor McNeil-Smith, go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you for the brief presentation. Can you point where, I think I know what the answer is, but can you point where the heat pumps, according to our bylaw, should be located if they were in accordance with the bylaw? I appreciate what the variance is, and you've shown by the 4 green squares, but they would be to the property in the left, A and B. They would be the rear yards or the.
Correct. Yeah, so basically you have the option of the sides or the rears. So for C and D, the sides are where we are proposing. If we moved them to the rear where the words patio are, it could run along any spot there. Unfortunately, what that puts us in is another situation where we would have to apply for another variance, because those rear setbacks are 3.32 meters and we need 3, and my understanding is with the size of the heat pump and the space you need from the a foot off of the house as well as airflow around, you need a meter. So we'd be getting really close again on those rears. The A and B, the side setbacks, or sorry, the rear setbacks, unfortunately I don't have that number here, but I do know that between A and the garage is 3.5 meters, and between B and their garage is 5.5. So you'd be encroaching the same amount of space into those patios as C and D, and those garages are very close to the property lines on the rear of those. So we're almost in a situation where we would need to be applying for variances, locating them in situations that aren't, or in places that aren't as ideal, which is why we're recommending the side.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Novak, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We know about the bylaws, and we know that we're starting to work more with these small footprint homes and lots. Why are we not designing the properties to take that into consideration and ensure that heat pump compressors are on the roof, out of the way,
Yeah.
appropriately masked?
Absolutely, that's a great question. My understanding is when we came to this point, the roof lines were already designed and already established when we realized at the phase that we were along in the project of where we're going to locate them, that unfortunately these heat pumps weren't able to be located on the roof. So that's where it put us in the situation of deciding whether it's the side or the back. Because we were so far along in the project, we had been approved through our development permit, building permit, that it came to everything else was so established already.
So you're suggesting that the people who design and build these things intentionally ignore the bylaws and build so that they're going to have to ask for a variance rather than figure out a way to incorporate it into the design from the get-go.
Yeah, no, I 100% see your point. Absolutely. Yeah.
Ms. Verhagen, I believe has a comment on that.
Thank you. Just to all, staff looked at the development permit and the building permit applications for these 4 houses and noted that there were no heat pumps shown on the proposed plan. So staff, they were not there to review, and the bylaw's been in place since well before this application came in. But having said that, with the implementation of the step code becoming mandatory as of today across BC, when somebody submits a building permit application, part of that application will have to be a pre-compliance report that says how that building is meeting the step code. So often the heating system has to be shown in that report. How will the building be heated? So when the building inspector sees a heat pump is listed in there, that will cue us to, again, look for it on the plan. That is part of staff's standard process right now, is to, if there's a heat pump shown on the plan, to check it against the zoning bylaw, make sure it's in a conforming location. In this instance, there were no heat pumps shown on the plan, but going forward through the step code implementation, that's much less likely to happen. We would see that as part of the building permit review before we get to this point in construction.
Thank you. Does anyone have questions for a second time to the applicant? All right. Thank you, Ms.
Thank
Stewart.
you. Thank you so much.
All right. I guess I'll open discussion. Does anyone or make a motion first? Sorry.
Sure, I'll move the recommendation that owners and tenants in occupation of property within 75 meters, 246 feet of 2356 and 2362 Orchard Avenue at 9658 and 96626 Sixth Street be notified regarding development variance permit application number DV 100335 to reduce the required minimum side setback for heat pumps, and that any written correspondence received be forwarded to council at the time of consideration approval of the variance.
Second.
Okay, so moved by Councillor Garnett, or moved by Councillor Rentoul, seconded by Councillor Garnett. We'll now open it for discussion. Any comments? All right, see Mayor McNeil-Smith first.
Thank you. Questions for you, Chair, to staff. When this notice is sent out, will this diagram be included in the notice?
Through the chair to the mayor, no, we don't typically include application plans with the notice. The notice shows the location of the properties, but not the development plans.
Thank you.
You're pointing, oh yeah, Councillor Garnett? No? Okay, Councillor Garnett, or Councillor Rentoul rather, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. No, I'll just speak to supporting the motion. I think, again, we have a process here. Neighbors have the opportunity to probably comment. This comes back to council. You know, I get the points my colleagues, you know, are sharing their observations here with respect to the process that's been undertaken. I tend to think that the placement is taken into consideration both the neighbors as well as the new owners, and you know, I appreciate that, and I think the neighborhood and the prospective owners will as well. So I'm happy to see this go out for comment in the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Garnett?
Thank you, Chair. To be completely honest, I came in here unsure. So you, Ms. Sabrin, you can let your colleagues know that you answered my questions in a way that I can support the recommendation. So it's probably better that they sent you in. You did a good job. And staff has spoken to something that was a concern for me, and it's really to the step code. So that also helps bring me some clarity, because I was having a concern because this was happening on multiple occasions where we have developments that are brand new, and developers were not considering heat pumps in the design process. And the concern I was getting over this over and over that it was happening is it was taking up valuable staff time, of which it's a finite resource. And so I'm appreciative of the fact this is likely to, with the new step code coming in, will not likely happen in the future. So I'm appreciative of that, and I appreciate that staff brought some clarity for me. So as I said, I can support this recommendation based on what I've heard this evening. Thank you.
Okay, I'll look for any additional comments. No, I have none myself. I think Councillor Garnett did a very thorough job at getting the information we need. I will call the question. All those in favor of moving this out? I don't know why I keep raising my hand. I'm in the chair. Habits. All right, thank you. We'll go on to 7B. Development Variance Permit number DV 100337 at 10245 Forsythia Place to reduce minimum rear setback and maximum size of a bay window projecting into a setback in order to legalize a deck and bay window. And we will start with a presentation from the applicant, David Timothy, who is here with us. Do you have a presentation or? No? No? Okay. You can take the podium when you're ready. And you've, okay. Some additional, can you use the microphone, please, so that, yeah, people will be able to hear you on the video recording?
I have some photographs for council and staff. And then I assume you have the report.
Well, we have the report and we have photographs in the report. And so I'm assuming that these are the same photographs that are with the report?
Just two additional ones.
Two additional ones? Okay.
I was told I could.
Yeah. Sure. Bring, yep. And you're right there. Okay. Sorry. Great, thank you. Everybody has a copy, and you may proceed when you're ready.
Thank you. Hello, and thank you for hearing me. I'm here regarding Development Variance Permit DV 100337, asking to increase the maximum permit area that a bay window may project and to reduce the rear setback from 5.5 meters to 4.26 meters to accommodate a deck extension and sunroom for my house at 10245 Forsythia Place. I've described the circumstances in a letter to the in my letter of application and in the staff report that you've received, and I'm here to answer any questions if you have them. I've handed out these additional photographs. One is of the project as seen from a neighbor's property, and the other is from the inside of the bay window.
Okay, so we have the application before us and your previous letter of rationale. I will look to my colleagues to see if there are any questions of the applicant. No, it does not appear so. You may resume your seat, and we'll, I guess, move on to questions if we have questions of council through to staff.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, then I will look for a motion on this one.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Did I have my microphone off that whole time?
No, I was deep
Okay.
in thought, so it's on me, trust me. Go ahead. Thank you, Chair. Sort of three to staff, and I'm trying to, again, think in terms of staff time and staff work, and I'm wondering, I realize this application is specific to the back, and staff mentions in the report the other potential issues, and I'm wondering if there is a reason why we didn't try to capture all of the potential variances at one request, as opposed to maybe having to come back to do it again for separate issues. If staff could speak to that.
Sure, thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Garnett. Yes, the staff report does speak to a couple other things on the property that are not in conformance with the zoning bylaw. The required front setback, and then an accessory building within a required setback area. Those are older issues. They're not the present issue at hand that the town received a complaint about. So
Okay.
we're looking into the one issue that was the subject of the concern that was raised. And the others have been like that for some time, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's just basically based on the complaint, if you will, with this specific thing in nature. Okay, thank you very
Yes,
much.
that's
Thank
right.
you, staff. Thank you,
Thank
Chair.
Any further questions? No? All right. Now I will look for a motion.
I'll move the recommendation that owners and tenants in occupation of property within 75 meters, that's 246 feet, of 10245 Forsythia Place be notified regarding development variance application number DV 100337 to increase the maximum permitted area that a bay window may project and reduce the rear yard setback from 5.5 meters to 4.26 meters, and that any written correspondence received be forwarded to council at the time of consideration of approval of the variance.
I'll second that.
All right, moved by Councillor Garnett, second by Councillor Novak. I will look for any discussion. No discussion. I will call a question. All in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. We will go on to item 8A, staff reports. This is the 2022 downtown parking study, report number 2. I will look to staff to see if there's a presentation on this. You'd like to go ahead, Ms. Clary? Go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. So as promised, this staff report reviews some of the significant recommendations from the 2022 downtown parking study. The parking study was presented by the consultant Watt during the March 6th, 2023 committee meeting. And then during the March 13th regular council meeting, council made several resolutions which are outlined in this report to bring back to a future meeting for further discussion. Council also requested Watt to provide some additional information, which was actually broken into two different parts. The first part is presented tonight, attached to this report, and the second part is related to the active transportation plan. So that will be brought forward when the next phase for the active transportation plan is brought forward. These items are discussed throughout the report, and there are a number of recommendations. The first one is that staff continue to allow the parking delineators to fade and not replace them as they are removed. That is by either paving over or some other work removes the parking delineators. This item was actually addressed in 2015 by council. At that time, there was an option to add an additional $15,000 budget for maintenance of these delineators, and that council at the time decided not to do that. So staff went and painted over them with black paint, and however, over time, the black paint has deteriorated, and so some of the white is showing through again. So rather than continuing to paint over them black, staff are proposing that they just allow to be faded unless council's prepared to bring forward additional budget for that ongoing maintenance of those delineators. The next recommendation is that staff be authorized to convert First and Second Streets between Oakville Avenue and Beacon Avenue to 1 hour time-limited parking. These were the busy streets that were identified in their parking study report. Shortening the parking time-limited parking hours to 1 hour will encourage vehicle turnover and therefore just have more people going to those businesses along that block. The next recommendation is that, subject to positive engagement with the downtown business community, staff bring forward a budget item for a paid parking pilot project on Beacon Avenue for consideration during the 2024 budget deliberations. This is something where Beacon Avenue, as you all know, was found to have over 85% utilization through the parking study. Beacon Avenue is really the only location in Sydney where that was the situation. So based on Watt's technical review, staff are supportive of that. If council does not intend to go forward with that, it would be helpful to know now rather than have staff resources continue to spend time on that item. And the fourth recommendation is that staff bring forward a report outlining details of a residential parking permit program in Q3 2024 for council consideration. This actually was identified as a medium to long-term item in Watt's report. However, staff do get requests for this from time to time, and also in Watt's study you can see that some of the outskirts, outlying residential areas do have some of the higher utilizations in the downtown. So we do see value in bringing something like that forward sooner for council's consideration. The Q3 2024 date was selected just based on staff resources and being able to do thorough investigation and research and bring forward a solution that really works for Sydney. There are solutions in the region, like Saanich has that, and City of Victoria has a residential parking permit program, but Sydney is a bit unique, so we want to just make sure we're bringing forward a solution that works for the town. And I am here to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you. I will look to my colleagues, see, okay, we've got a few.
Just a point of process, a point of procedure. If we could separate the four motions,
Yeah, I will be separating the four motions.
and perhaps if we're dealing with them one at a time, if we have questions, of staff on those, rather than going through questions on all four and then moving them recommendations. So
Okay.
dealing with questions and resolution for each of them individually is a suggestion if there's a consensus.
Yep. Do we need a motion to make a consensus on that? I'm looking at everyone just kind of nodding, so, okay. Then we will start by, I guess I will look for recommendations, and then we will do questions to staff. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. I'd like to move the first recommendation that staff continue to allow the parking delineators to fade and not replace them as they are removed.
Okay, it's moved and seconded. Now, questions to staff on that. Mayor McNeil-Smith, go ahead.
Well, sorry, I'll turn to any questions. I'll motivate if there
You'll motivate.
after there are any questions.
Yeah, go
I have
ahead.
a question. Oh, sorry.
Counselor, you have a question as well? Okay, Counselor Rintoul, you were the seconder, so you may do questions first, followed by Counselor Garnett again.
Okay, thank you. Question through to staff, if I may, just to clarify, with regard to allowing parking delineators to fade, what about in the context of accessible parking spaces and loading zones? I take it those are addressed differently.
Through to Councillor Rintoul, those are dealt with by painting the curb, so loading zones are painted white and the accessible parking spaces are painted blue at the curb.
And is there street signage there as well?
There is street signage as well, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Go ahead, Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to staff. In the report, it mentions that in 2015, the annual operating budget would be $15,000. Given that that was 8 years ago, do we anticipate that cost would be higher today?
Through to Councillor Garnett, we do. We didn't go through the process of updating those numbers, but yes, I would expect it to be higher today.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Novak, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to staff, we're allowing the parking delineators to fade, but if we agree on the item that's numbered 3 in this and we go into a paid parking pilot project, are we not going to have to recreate those parking delineators in some way?
Through to Councillor Novak, there are several different ways you could do paid on-street parking. Some of them are by parking stall. City of Victoria is an example of by parking stall. Other locations, you just put in your license plate and then you can park along the street as long as your license plate is in. There could be potentially more cars that could fit in than would with the delineated space. So it really depends what type of, if we did move forward with on-street parking, what type of on-street parking we choose.
And in the interim, it makes sense just to let those delineators disappear.
Staff believes so, yes. As they're paved over or as they are removed, some of them have bus stops over them, so we have continued to paint those ones black in particular. But yes, our preference is to just let them disappear.
Fair enough, thank you.
Great, thank you. Any further questions on this item? Yeah, Mayor McNeil-Smith, go ahead.
Yeah, I actually do have a question before I motivate, and that is, the staff recommendation is to let the delineators fade, but in the introduction, and I think in the report as well, it's indicated that in 2015 or thereabouts, black paint was used to cover the delineators, and black paint is faded in a number of areas, which I think we've all seen. But staff haven't attached a cost to using black paint to cover those white markings that are where the black paint has faded over the white. Could staff comment on that?
Yes, through to Mayor McNeil-Smith, even that is an ongoing maintenance cost, so we would recommend that it just, unless there's situations where there's issues, for example, like bus stops, where we would have to go paint over them to make sure no one parks in those spaces. We would just prefer to let them fade away. If there's a certain location where we get a request to paint over it, we would do it rather than going out and doing the whole downtown again, like was done in the past.
Thank you.
All right, would you like to motivate now?
Yes, thank you. I was undecided on this through the presentation when we first received the report, and I did ask a question of the presenter from Watt that is there best practice out there in the field as to whether or not delineators provide more efficient use of parking space, allowable parking space, and the reply was that there wasn't. And I noted in the 2015 staff report that we were provided with in our package that staff commented that in theory parking spot delineation will increase parking efficiency by ensuring the maximum number of cars can fit in a block, but then continues that, after talking about different car lengths, that it is even possible that overall parking efficiency is decreased by the use of painted delineation markers. So I just have to express some surprise that there isn't, given that there is parking all over the world, that it hasn't been determined with some certainty whether delineators make for more efficient parking or not. And so I will, in the absence of that information, and appreciating that there is a significant cost to maintaining the delineators, I would note that I'm in the downtown, have been in the downtown a fair bit over the past 20 years, and there hasn't, since 2015, I haven't received a lot of, or in serving this role, I haven't received a lot of comments about the delineators or not. There is one individual who is absolutely determined that we should have delineators, but in the absence of many individuals coming forward, I'm supportive of the staff recommendation, and I think apart from the cost, apart from the staff time, it's more environmentally friendly.
Thank you. The seconder, no, nobody has. Councillor Garnett, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was also, I'm also, even coming into tonight, unsure. And I'm looking at the report talking about average car today is quite a bit shorter, and while that's true, we seem to be a community of SUVs, and they are a fair bit larger. And I also looked at it from a couple other perspectives. And when you have delineated markers, I mean, I can't speak to other drivers, but I find it makes a lot easier to gauge whether I'm gonna be able to fit into a spot. I know for sure when when I can see both lines, I'm getting in there with pretty good ease. And if I'm not, if somebody goes over the lines, it becomes a bit of a can I, can't I? And I think also it prevents a little bit of what I call creeping. And that is when you park in a spot and you come out and find that somebody's right on your bumper or right in front of your bumper, and it takes you 30 moves to get out of your parking spot. And I haven't experienced that at all when I parked in a delineated spot, but I have experienced it where there is no markers. So I'm kind of floating, those things came into my mind, so I was unsure how we would approach this tonight, and so I was open to listening to what everybody else had to say before I made a determination. And I see not everybody speaking, but I'm hoping there'll be some more before I have to vote, so I can have time to think about it. Thank you, Chair.
Welcome. Does anybody want to address Councillor Garnett, wanting to hear from other people? Okay, Councillor Rentula, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm happy to provide my insight then, because I didn't come in, as on the fence on this one, and in part because this is what we've been doing since 2015, as I've heard. So this isn't a change. The community's accustomed to it. It's not an unusual practice in other communities to see these parking lines having been removed, and I concur. You're right. There are a lot of larger vehicles in our community, but likewise we seem to be shifting towards smaller vehicles and electric vehicles that are likely to take up less space. So I'm quite happy to support this on the basis that our community is already, in my view, accustomed to this practice. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I wasn't, unless Councillor Novak has anything to, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a very large truck and a relatively small car. When I'm driving my truck, it's very hard for me to find parking because the spaces just seem to, of their own accord, shrink and grow depending on what's going on the street. The nice thing about having the delineators is that all the spots are the same, and you can get into just about any spot. That being said, this isn't for me. This is for the citizenry of Sydney, and I would suggest that with the advent of electric vehicles, there are more smaller vehicles out there, and the likelihood that parking density could increase by anywhere from 10 to 20% would help to alleviate the problem that we're trying to solve. So I think this is one good step on the way to that result. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I wasn't really on the fence with this one either. I figured I had some of the same concerns about whether, in theory, it I think is a more efficient to be able to let cars of various lengths be able to fit themselves in. On the other hand, there's always those times when you pull in and somebody has left half a car length and they've not pulled forward, and that you could fit more cars on that street, but somebody hasn't let that happen. And the delineators, I think, would kind of tell some of those people to pull forward and make sure that that everyone gets in. On the other hand, it's definitely true that if you have some smaller cars, more people can fit in than you would with the delineators. And in the end, I figure it's probably a wash, the pros and cons on this one. So unless I'm happy to move forward with it and see if any problems come up, especially knowing that we would be discussing other potential parking changes later. So unless anyone would like to speak for a second time, I will move forward with calling the question. All right, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. I'll look for a recommendation on item 2.
Sure, I'll move that staff be authorized to convert First and Second Streets between Oakville Avenue and Beacon Avenue to a 1-hour time limit.
I'll second that.
Okay, moved and seconded, and now we'll go to questions for staff on this item. Okay, do the mover and seconder wish to motivate? No. All right. Does anyone have a discussion on this item? The mover and seconder did not wish to. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not sure whether I'll support this. I noted and I've made a copy of the page from the Watt report. It's page 64 that says there are several locations in the study area where parking utilization was observed to be consistently high. And then it goes on to identify First Street from Oakville to Beacon and Second Street from Oakville to Beacon. And when we think of the downtown, that stretch from Oakville to Beacon. So first you have Oakville to Bevan, and then you have Bevan to Beacon. And I just don't see the stretches between Oakville and Bevan as being high demand for turnover because they're furthest away from the majority of the downtown businesses. It's more concentrated on Beacon Avenue or the side streets. And so I'm not sure, and I didn't see this and pose it as a question to why when they indicated that there were several locations that were observed to be consistently high, why they chose these particular two. Everywhere else is, Beacon Avenue is 1 hour. All of the other side streets, Bevan Avenue, and these two locations are 2 hours. And I think it's consistent, and I'm not sure that these two relatively short stretches are going to make a difference. And if anything, might introduce some confusion to what is generally understood as 3 hours in the parking lots, 2 hours on the side streets, Bevan and Sydney, and 1 hour on Beacon Avenue. So I'll listen to colleagues if there are any further comments. Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you. I'll look to my other colleagues. Councillor Novak, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll support this. I've lived in that area for 5 years, and one of my big concerns was that those streets are constantly packed. It's difficult to find parking there, and I think one of the reasons is not so much the businesses, but access to the beach, and that attracts a lot of people, and they tend to sit there for long periods of time. And I agree that having a shorter time limit there would allow those vehicles to turn over and give more people the opportunity to get close to the beach. And if they want to spend more time there, then they've either got to go to a lot or park further away to allow the people that want to just do the short stay there the opportunity to get in and do their thing and get out. So I don't think this is a bad idea for that location, because I know that parking density there seems to be much higher than it is on the other side streets from 3rd through to 6th or 7th. So I'm okay to support it for those reasons.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? You're considering it? No. I'm willing to support it. I have some of the, same questions, because the rationale I'm guessing is that the commercial businesses are, as for building the new buildings outside the commercial core, we now have a few commercial businesses that are getting busier too, and pulling foot traffic away onto those streets, are kind of clustering around in that area. and that's like the farthest down Beacon where we get the most foot traffic in the center of downtown. So those would be the streets to start with, and I would be guessing that's why. I would think that, you know, third and fourth would have, you know, roughly the same criteria with new businesses coming in and having that same expansion out of the downtown. But I'm comfortable with moving forward with this one, and even though it may add confusion, I think the proximity to the parks and, as Councillor Novak says, the beach area, give it slightly more demand than those places, and that we can go with this for now. And then if it turns out we continue, you know, by our next parking study or even before that, if there was a serious, you know, problem, but I'm guessing next parking study would be adequate, be able to address whether that's affected parking enough, or if we need to move forward with 1 hour parking on additional areas. So unless anyone has more comments about that, yeah, go ahead, Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just upon reflection of my walk through there today, actually, because I took a look at it, I noted that parking lot A was only half full, and this was the middle of the day. So, and that being a free parking lot, it makes me more comfortable with it, knowing that if people wanted to park for longer periods of time in that vicinity, they would have that opportunity or that potential access. So, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. All right, I'll move forward then, call the question, and look for all in favor. Okay, we have 3 in favor, for myself as well. All opposed? Okay, Mayor Neil Smith is opposed. The motion carries. And our last item, item 4, I will look for a motion. Oh, 3? Did I skip? Oh, I skipped the big one too, which is gonna, I'll look for a motion on item 3.
I'll make that motion.
All right.
That, subject to positive engagement with the downtown business community, staff bring forward a budget item for paid parking pilot project on Beacon Avenue for consideration during the 2024 budget deliberations.
Thank you. And a seconder? Nobody wants to second the motion going forward, not even for discussion.
I'll second for discussion.
Okay. I've got the motion on the floor. We'll go with questions through to staff, if anybody has any. No? All right.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I do have one question through to staff. If I recall from the presentation Watt gave at a previous meeting, that they counted the parking spaces each hour.
Correct, with the exception of noon. They took off for lunch, but then
Right.
they collected each hour other than that through the day.
Thank you.
Well, I suppose I will, the mover and seconder want to motivate, but go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a tough one. I've got some concerns, although I think it should be on the floor to discuss. And I'm okay with the idea of seeing a study to maybe get a little bit more in the way of particulars as to what this would actually look like, what staff would recommend in the way of a paid parking program. I think it behooves us to at least see what that looks like and get some feedback from the downtown business community as to whether or not this would be a positive thing for them, or if they would be totally opposed to it. So at this point, since we're only looking at a budget item, and I assume that there will be some studies and some revenue and expense models contemplated by staff to see exactly what this would cost and what it would bring in terms of revenue, then it gives us a much better basis on which to ultimately make that decision when it comes forward during budget deliberations. So for that reason, I'm happy to see this go forward at this point and see what staff bring back to us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, Councillor Garnett was the seconder, so I'll turn him first and then Councillor O'Toole.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, And staff spoke to questions I asked earlier today. The reality is if we bring in a pilot paid parking, it's not gonna go backwards in all likelihood. So it would be an investment, and we don't know what that cost is gonna be, but clearly that would come forth in budget deliberations. And from my perspective, as far as the positive engagement with the downtown business community through the SBIA, I would hope that if we go out on that particular way, that I would like to see 100%. Every single business gets to weigh in, and I don't know how that can possibly happen, but I certainly wouldn't be comfortable moving ahead with anything of a nature where it's like 50 to 60% of businesses responded, because we really need to hear from everybody if we're going to make this change, because it will impact every single business within the SBIA's realm. So I'll leave my comments there and listen to hear others speak. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Rentoul, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm not keen to see staff spend time and resources on this personally. I think the engagement with the business community is probably too narrow. There's probably a broader focus that should be on engagement, not just with the retailers, and I'm quite sure I'm comfortable with where they would stand on this suggestion. And there's also the work that goes into the costs associated with the undertaking to the point to bring it to budget. So I think from that efficiency standpoint, when I look at our retail environment post-pandemic, we want to be encouraging people into Sydney. I can't see turning and announcing that we're going to start charging for parking spaces when the parking study itself makes this as a recommendation for consideration, but certainly not strongly in my opinion. I don't think we're there yet, and I'm happy to see this one fall by the wayside for the time being. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor McNeil-Smith.
Thank you. I won't be supporting the motion, and while I appreciate that it was a recommendation, I think that partly through the conduct of this, or the way the study proceeded, was that the parking was measured on an hourly basis on these parking stalls, and I can speak from 22 years of experience on Beacon Avenue, that these many of these parking stalls will turn over a number of times within an hour, and so they already have the shortest permitted parking time. We know that's 3 hours in the public parking lots. We know it's 2 hours on the side streets, and it's only 1 hour on Beacon Avenue. But even within that hour, parking spaces are turning over with frequency, and that's not reported out in the report. I've had a fair bit of public feedback on this, and not supportive of it, and one of the comments made numerous times is that, am I going to pay for parking for 20 minutes? If I'm going into a shop to pick something up that I've already pre-ordered and want it to be close, so it's bulky and I want to put it into a vehicle to transport at home. And so I think the parking is working. I think the parking is working on Beacon Avenue is working very effectively. I think it may be the fact that it can be in excess of 85% at times may contribute to the perception that we hear in the community that there is that we have a parking problem because of folks' unwillingness to seek parking a little further away from Beacon Avenue and make the walk. We do know the demographic of our community, and that there are more. On a percentage basis, more residents that have mobility challenges as a percentage of the population. So I don't see the practicality of charging for parking when people are already parking for a short period of time, and I'm not seeing that they're actually going to want to park 2 blocks away or be supportive of having parking on Beacon Avenue and they parking so that they don't have to get out of their car and spend a portion of the time paying for parking whether it's an app or whether it's a parking meter or what have you, when they're only gonna be there in the parking space, and sort of thing. So I think it's where we're at today in terms of there's 1 hour parking, and certainly people do park for, you know, the full hour or close to the full hour, but you see a lot of parking spaces turn over several times in an hour. As I say, think coffee shops, think restaurants, you know, picking, you know, when people are doing takeout, and think retailers when they're actually dropping in to pick things up, not necessarily shop, but certainly since the pandemic, there's a lot more online and a lot more telephone orders into businesses where customers are just coming in to pick things up.
Thank you. Great. I think everybody has already spoken, so I guess I'll just state, I mean, I was prepared to go with this either way. Councillor Novak spoke to the idea that if this was something we wanted to consider because it came forward, that this would not be going forward with it. This would be actually getting data on what the business community thought, and a budget item, and you know, that would actually give us data to consider it one way or another, rather than kind of having discussions on whether there was merit to it one way or another, with a bit of a, I guess, a straw man to kick around that we didn't really know. But after hearing my colleagues discuss it, that this is something we hear sometimes from residents, that we have a parking problem. We get a report that says, no, Sydney doesn't really have a parking problem, though it's very busy on Beacon Avenue. So this feels like it would be a very potentially expensive and staff time consuming solution to a problem that we don't actually have, and that, you know, we're going to be putting in place other means to maybe kind of mitigate in the meantime. So I would be comfortable as well, you know, voting against this motion and waiting to see what happens in another 5 years after we've implemented everything else. So speakers for a second time, Councillor Novak and then Mayor McNeil-Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I said, as I prefaced my comments earlier, I'm of mixed mind on this. And while I did make the motion to put this on the floor so that we could discuss it, my gut feeling tells me not to support the motion. A couple of reasons. Mayor McNeil-Smith alluded to one of them, and that is that if we already have the short stay parking duration on Beacon, and if we put in parking meters, that's not going to induce, if people only have something to pick up and then they're on their way, having the meters there is not going to induce them to stay for a shorter period of time. So I don't see that that's going to fix the problem that we have with parking. The problem is one of popularity, and parking meters is not going to change that. So I don't like that for that reason. Another reason I'm not crazy about it is that I don't want to be part of the council that brought paid parking into Sydney. I think that has a very bad perception by the public. We're a quaint seaside town. We're popular. People want to come in. I believe we're one of the few jurisdictions, well, not one of the few jurisdictions, but we are a jurisdiction where there is no paid parking, and I'd hate to be the one to initiate that when the need is minimal at best, as supported by this parking survey. So for those reasons, I'm not going to support my own motion because I didn't really like it in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor McNeil-Smith.
Something else I meant to mention when speaking last was with regards to public engagement. Public engagement is a very good thing. I think if we were to do public engagement on an increase in taxes, which we go through that process each year, and taxes do rise to various amounts each year, you're not going to get a positive response if you do a survey about increasing taxes. And I don't think we're going to get a positive response from the majority of the community with regards to imposing a charge for parking on the main street of the community. I think it's incumbent on council with the report from Watt and with the report from staff that we look at the data and we look at the rationale for putting in paid parking, and we're acting in the best interests of the community. I just don't think you're gonna get, in any scenario, you're gonna get a positive response to engagement to putting in public parking. And as I indicated, I've already heard, people with concerns. And so while I'm listening to those concerns and understand them and spoke to one point in terms of the shorter turnover, I think that, I think now is not the time for paid parking, on Beacon Avenue, and I'm not forecasting, what that will be in the future. I won't be surprised if it is a measure, that may be required, maybe should be put in place on Beacon Avenue or in the entire downtown, but I don't think this is the appropriate time to do that.
Okay, thank you. I think everybody has spoken to this, so I will call the question. All those in favor? And all those opposed? Okay, that is everyone opposed, unanimously opposed. I will move on to item number 4 and look for a motion.
I'll move that staff bring forward a report outlining details of a residential parking permit program for council's consideration.
Second.
Okay, I noted you dropped the in Q3 2024. I'm guessing that was on purpose, and I'll let you motivate.
Yeah, thank you. So it would have been a question through to staff prior to making that motion. I guess my concern is, I didn't necessarily feel from the report the sensitivity to urgency around this. Recognizing that we're in Q2 now, staff are making this recommendation, so I'm assuming they're comfortable with it. But I know things obviously change in the busy construction season that will be before us, and I'm comfortable knowing that this will come back to council unless staff would prefer to see a hard and fast timeline. I'm happy to see it come back without. Well, I'm further motivating to the motion I will suggest today. I think it is an important exercise to see the community go through and have some deliberation by council on this matter, particularly as we see residents perhaps in the community without dedicated parking spaces, and how we can maybe look to address this issue as parking fills up on side streets, further away from the immediate downtown core, and sort of that knock-on domino effect that may present itself. So happy to see us talk about it, not feeling that it's urgent. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll look to Mr. Humble first.
Yeah, thank you. Just a question of clarification to Councillor Rintoul, if I may. So is the suggestion, Councillor Rintoul, that you're not necessarily wanting to see this accelerated or moving sooner than Q3 2024, or quite frankly, you're fine if it's later than Q3 2024?
Correct. I'm comfortable seeing it at staff's discretion with workload. So I would not anticipate it coming in advance of Q3 2024, and I don't think it's a necessity that we pin it down to Q3 either.
Thank you.
Sorry, point of order, for clarification, the motion that was put on the floor was the wording of the staff recommendation?
No, Councillor Rintoul removed Q3 2024, so it currently actually has no deadline on it, so it would, I'm guessing, just simply be something that staff put on the running list of motions that they have, and they would bring it forward for, a future 5-year plan, at that time, if that still worked, or at a later time if they felt that would actually be better, because council did not feel it was pressing, I think was the intention. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. So I have a differing view on this, and it's based on residents coming forward over the years and a number during this term. In 2 or 3 areas of our community, but one in particular is on 7th Street, immediately north of James White Boulevard, in the corridor there to the school grounds, and residents on that section of street have come forward and not in public meetings, but to myself, concerned that that employees, park very early in the day, and that there isn't any residential use available to them. And there are other areas, a couple of other areas in the community that have cropped up over the years, but when I read this recommendation, I noted that it said a residential parking permit program. And a program, I gather, would consider, and staff did indicate that residents have come forward to staff with concerns, and that staff would review those concerns in whatever locations, and they would bring forward possibly residential permitting in more than one location, perhaps close to the in the residential areas immediately to the downtown, north and south of downtown, because that's where the concern has been over the last 20 years. I would prefer to see a pilot. I'm considering making an amendment to change it to residential parking permit program to a residential parking permit pilot, because when I asked staff after residents had come to me about residential permitting, it turns out, and as staff I think mentioned in their introduction, there are different ways of different logistics of implementing a residential permitting program, and so that would be one of the things that staff would be looking at in terms of the options to do that. And so I would prefer to see a pilot, and my feeling is that given the input that I've had from residents directly, and that staff have had input from residents, that I would prefer to see that come forward for budget time of 2024. Now, I appreciate that one of the considerations in the staff recommendation is the staff resource, allocating staff resource. Councillor O'Toole mentioned that in terms of not including the date in his motion that he put on the floor. So a question through you, Chair, to staff is thinking of a pilot rather than a program, and the work that might be entail with that. Do staff feel that that there would be adequate resource to bring it forward in budget of 2024?
Through to Mayor McNeil-Smith, I do think just because of the amount of research required, we want to bring in the right program. We don't just want to throw something together and bring it forward. We probably could do that this year, but to really just make sure we have the time to do the right research and enough research, and make sure whatever pilot project we bring forward can be eventually implemented through a larger portion of the town. I do think there's value in not rushing it. So I think it would be challenging to complete this year based on that. If that was something that council really wanted us to do and wanted us to put other things aside to make it happen, we could do that.
Okay, thank you. Chair, I will propose an amendment, and that is to change the wording to the word program to pilot, and to add Q3 2024. Not 23 as I was speaking to, but to 2024. And if there's a seconder to that amendment, I'll speak to speak to the points. So I think I've already motivated with regards to pilot versus program. My reason for inserting the date is I think when we have an action item, when there's a council resolution to, and call this a project because it is going to involve staff time, that there should be a date associated with it, and that, as has been the case with other projects for a variety of reasons, due to other priorities that arise or otherwise, staff can come forward, and that date is recommended to be changed by staff to council, and that subsequent to the discussion we're having regarding these points, these recommendations, if, members of the community, reach out in larger numbers in the, say over the next year or in the coming months, with regards to a residential pilot for a particular area, that's something that staff could consider, but I'm comfortable understanding the staff resource to propose the amendments as I've done.
Okay, I will look to actually the seconder first, and then Councillor Rintoul.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I support this however it gets proposed. As a first-time councillor, I don't have a lot of history with this. However, during my campaigning, I went to a lot of residences north of Beacon, especially north end of Resthaven and All Bay area, and without doubt that was the number one issue that was presented to me. As we continue to densify in certain areas, and the example that comes to mind is Resthaven, just north of the park where we've got those townhouse projects going in. All of a sudden, the first one's done, and now parking on the street is a big deal. This is only going to continue, and it's going to make it more and more difficult for residents to find parking, especially when there are competing interests, such as the park, and especially such as Salem Harbor, where workers tend to park on the street because there's no cost to them, and as a result, the residents come home, or whatever time they come home, they can't find a place to park. So I think that this is necessary. I would probably consider taking a step further and designating an area for the pilot, because as Mayor McNeil Smith alluded to earlier, there are a number of areas, and I'm not sure which one would be the ideal one to test this out, but perhaps staff have a better idea with a record of interventions by residents. So from that perspective, I'd be very happy to see this go forward. It would address a long-standing concern of many residents, especially in the north end of town, and let's see where it goes. If worst comes to worst, we can take it away if it's not achieving the goals.
Thank you. Now, I would like to turn to just ask Councillor Garnett. You were the seconder of the first motion, and I never got you to talk about it either way. Now it's changed quite a bit from.
Sir, if I point of order, we
Yeah.
should be speaking to the amendment, and the amendment
the
is
amendment,
changing
okay.
the changing of the wording and the inclusion of the date. We will come back to the main motion after the amendment is dealt with.
Okay. Councillor Rintoul, then go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I'll support the amendment. I don't think it's a stretch. The removal of the word program and adding pilot, it certainly clarifies the intent. A healthy timeline here in the context of Q4 2024, and it aligns to budget season and that conversation. So I'm happy to support the amendment. Thank you.
Okay. Now, Councillor Garnett would like to speak to the amendment. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Just to seek some, through you to staff, to seek some clarification. I'm fine with the time frame simply because that's what staff presented, and I'm sure they felt comfortable with it. Do you have any concerns or issues with the changing in the wording from program to pilot?
Through to Councillor Garnett, no, I think we would probably look to do that initially anyway. So yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I guess I will speak for the first time then. I'm happy to have the timeline back in. I think simply it's easier for staff. It's almost 2 years, a year and a half from now, just to have that kind of there where they know where they're supposed to be looking at in the budget. And we don't always know. Sometimes we have carry forward projects all the time that get bumped, and we change things at strategic planning. If we decided this we see what's coming down the pipe that look like bigger projects, we could have changed that in the future anyway. So I liked having the date in. I'm not sure about the idea of having pilot versus program. I think simply for the reason Councillor Novak was supporting of it, is that we've actually got kind of two different issues with the residential parking complaints. And so around 7th Street and Oakville neighborhood, on the other side, what we hear from the residents is that it's people they think are going to the businesses and employees who are using their area, and they can't have parking for their residents and the visitors to the residential area. And what they want is a residential parking permits so that they can park near their houses, and the employees would be forced to actually go into one of the parking lots. Whereas Councillor Novak has just brought up the issue of another area where people are worried about residents not being able to park on the street, and what they would be possibly competing with would be employees at the harbors and further down the same harbor area. However, I know that those are kind of business areas where there might not actually be as much alternative employee parking as we have downtown. Now, I don't know, I mean, maybe it is the same issue and they actually do, but I think what I would be concerned with there is that we have these kind of key industrial areas that are already very pinched for land, especially as their businesses there expand, and that if we make it harder for their employees to park in these areas, we won't have anywhere to put them, and that's been a priority with our business kind of development goals, was to support those businesses. So I do worry about having a pilot that looks at one part of the town that has actually a kind of a different driver behind it, but I suppose staff would be able to take that into consideration. Perhaps we would have pilots in two different areas to see whether that was a problem. And I suppose the work involved in coming up with the pilot is essentially the same as the program, and that the change is really that it gives some idea to the residents that the program we put in place isn't a done thing, and we're not having to take apart, a bylaw and policies later, but that this is just a test, and if it doesn't actually address the issue, it will be easier to appeal. So even though I have my hesitations, I think overall I'm okay with supporting that. So we'll see if there's anybody who wishes to speak for a second time before I call a question on the amendment. Okay, no more discussion. I will call the question on the amendment to the motion. All in favor? Okay, that's unanimous, or all in favor. Now we'll call the question on the motion as amended. Do I need to do that? We have the, yes, I do. Okay, discussion first on the full motion as amended. No, I think we all mostly addressed the points while we were discussing the amendment because of the time change was different from your original motion. So I will just go ahead and call the question. All in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. All in favor. We have nothing more. Oh, go ahead. Mayor
Chair, I would like to possibly consider a motion arising, but I would like to perhaps ask a question of staff, and I may put the motion on the floor for discussion. And that is on the first page of the staff report, it indicated the different recommendations from Council's previous resolution of March 13th. And one was action 2B, allow long-term overnight parking in downtown employee and public parking lots. And I shouldn't motivate without putting motion on the floor, but I just want to describe it, and then I'm going to have a question for staff. And that is, we have public lots, town lots, and in at least 2 of those lots, we have signs that posted saying no overnight parking. So parking lot C across the street from the town hall has a sign, no overnight parking. We know because the previous council knows that we also implemented it based on a staff recommendation in parking lot B, which is behind the Oceana, and there was good reasons for doing that. And the parking signs there say no overnight parking between 11 p.m. and I think it's 7 a.m., 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. And I'm sorry, I just didn't have a chance to check the other lots, all of the other lots. But there is parking in the two lots I've just described, both parking lot B and parking lot C overnight. And I sense, I don't have data to prove it, but I sense from my experience working downtown, is that with the opening of residential units above commercial, significant number of residential units above commercial in the downtown, that there are residents using it as off-street parking overnight. And it is a question for me whether we should be addressing that, because currently our parking enforcement doesn't cover evenings, it covers daytime. So my question through to staff is that I just want clarification. I think I know the answer to these questions, but is that there is currently no parking enforcement for our parking lots, public parking lots that say no overnight parking. Robbins Parking does do parking enforcement daytime for those parking lots, but not in the evenings.
Through to Mayor McNeil Smith, Robbins Parking was enforcing parking lot B, the one in behind the Oceana. They were doing it once a week on their availability. So they did do that for a period of time. I believe they have stopped that now, but that was when it was first opened. It's actually part of our lease arrangements to not allow people to park overnight in that lot. So we did have them do that, and we can follow up with them to see if they can start that again. We have received many inquiries about the other parking lots and parking overnight, and we have been consistently telling people that if it becomes a problem, we will look to have enforcement in those lots overnight as well. We haven't received many complaints about that, but if we did start receiving complaints, then that would be when we would bring Robbins in for those other lots as well.
Thank you. And I guess I would draw a distinction based on that answer, a helpful answer, that the rationale for enforcement in parking lot B is different than the other parking lots because of the all of the residential immediately on three sides of that parking lot. So pleased to hear that enforcement was in place for that. Having served on a previous council, 2008 to 2011, when we had a parking study done, there was concern about overnight parking in those lots from recreation vehicles, from people parking overnight when they were visiting the community in their recreation vehicle, or it was a boom time in Sydney in around 2007, 2008. I know that employees who are construction workers were living in their cars and parking in these lots. And I don't know if overnight parking signs were posted before that time, but I know it was a topic of discussion at that time. I don't know that we have that problem, or the staff haven't reported that there have been concerns expressed by the community. I haven't seen that kind of use. Where my concern lies is that if residents have vehicles that they don't have parking for their vehicles in the mixed-use residential building that they're living in, that they're using these parking lots, and if they're using them for that purpose, I think they should be paying for it. And I'll take council back to it was the previous term, so those serving the past term, when we looked at.
Do you have a motion on the floor yet? Maybe you begin motivating for it after you ask the question through to staff. Don't technically have a motion on the floor.
My question through to staff, before I put a motion on the floor, is do staff believe they have some resource to bring back over the next year a consideration of monitoring of parking, overnight parking, and recommendations in the public lots, apart from parking lot B, which is already enforced, so to speak?
Correct. Through to Councillor McNeil Smith, we would need a budget item if we were requesting Robbins to do this consistently in all the parking lots. So we could bring something like that forward. We also would need a minor bylaw amendment to also prohibit the overnight parking. I don't think technically it's prohibited if you have a monthly pass at this time, but yeah, it is something that is possible.
I'll put a motion on the floor that that staff bring forward a report by for budget 2024 on enforcement of parking in the town public parking lots downtown.
I'll second for discussion.
Okay, do you wish to motivate further?
Yeah, I want to make a distinction between some of these residents, I believe, are parking on the street overnight, and some are parking in the parking lots. I don't know whether they feel the parking lot is more protected or what have you, but I have that sense. I don't see enforcement of the current parking that just says no overnight parking and charging a fine if they're parking in the parking lot versus parking on the street. What I would want to see staff bring forward is that there would be parking fees for residents parking in the town parking lots overnight, and then Robbins could enforce that, but that would be staff to bring forward if it's feasible. I don't know if staff have concerns with the viability of that, or it would have to be looked in, but that's the intent of my motion, is not just simply to have enforcement on the current parking, current overnight parking where there is no charge to parking night, but it would be to looking to implement a charge which would require enforcement.
Mr. Hisik, would you like to speak to this?
Council may recall that there's also a commitment to report back on parking rates once the study is adopted. Perhaps this topic could be touched on in that report.
I'll withdraw my motion.
Okay.
I'll withdraw my
Seconders.
second then.
All right. And Mayor McNeil-Smith, go ahead.
I have another item arising which will be a little shorter. I want to thank staff and Watt for bringing forward the revised numbers as requested, which included and I just want to turn to this page. The additional analysis, which indicated that the total number of on-street public parking spaces in the downtown commercial core is 479, and that the off-street public parking spaces in town-owned parking lots is 201, and then there's the Mary Winspirit 167 employee parking. What I did note is in the addendum that to the parking study that is in our package, on page 2 of the report, it shows the parking area that was, the commercial core area that was used to determine, that I understand was used to determine the parking spaces. And I would note that there is commercially zoned businesses on the ground floor for 1st Street, 2nd Street, 3rd Street, 4th Street, and 5th Street between Bevan and Oakville, that based on the map that is in the report, those commercial parking spaces weren't added. And in a walkabout through that area, I would suggest that there are a few dozen, if not more, parking spaces in that area, and I think those parking spaces should be added to the 479. So I'll put a question through to staff. I know this question went through to staff earlier today. Is staff aware that the boundary in red that we see on the map was the strict boundary used for calculating the core commercial spaces?
Through to Mayor McNeil-Smith, yes, it was the same commercial core area that was used for the 2016 study, so they carried it over to this study, but they actually added parking lot A because it is now a 3-hour parking lot instead of long-term, and then the Mary Winspirit employee parking lot was added as well.
Thank you. I would move that we request Watt update this analysis to show those commercial parking spots on those 5 streets that I indicated between Oakville and Bevan. And I'll motivate if there's a seconder.
Yeah, I'm gonna look to Ms. Verhagen first. She's-
Through the chair to the mayor, may I ask a question of clarification? Are you asking that the parking spaces on private property be counted towards the number of public on-street parking spaces for the public?
No, it's the on-street parking spaces on those 5 streets that all have signage for 2-hour parking in the downtown core.
Thank you.
We'll look for a seconder then.
A second for discussion.
Okay, feel free to motivate, Mr. Markey.
Thank you. I think it's helpful to have these numbers of the on-street public parking spaces in the downtown commercial core. Those 5 corridors that I indicated are part of the downtown commercial zone. It's part of our zoning. It's part of the downtown BIA area. And I think these will be numbers that will be referred to in future parking studies. And I think it should show the parking we're actually providing.
Okay, Mr. Hummel, you had your hand up earlier.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to indicate to council, so that would be an additional cost to do that, because it would be beyond the scope of the original contract. So there will be an additional cost, and we don't know what that cost is yet. It could be nominal. It could be yeah. So I don't have that cost right now, but I just wanted to point that out.
Ms. Clary?
Perhaps could this just be something that staff bring forward for the next parking study? We make sure those spaces are included for the next parking study that's done in 5 years.
If it's a question through
Go ahead.
myself.
You probably-
No, I think this information should be now. Quite frankly, I was surprised that this information wasn't in the original presentation. We're talking about parking in our downtown, and this is very delineated parking in terms of the commercial public parking spaces on street, the public parking spaces off street, and the Mary Winspear lot. And I think it should accurately reflect the parking that we're providing today to the downtown, to our downtown business community, but the community at large and visitors. A question I would pose through to staff is that these are relatively short corridors, and I realize we've let the parking the markings fade, but I gather Watt had a calculation based on linear feet of some sort, how many equivalent parking spaces were there. If I knew that measurement, I might have been able to do it in a few hours myself. Is it reasonable for staff to do this rather than referring it back to Watt?
Sorry,
Ms. Clary.
just to clarify, you're not looking to have this memo updated, you're just looking, you're hoping to get just the number of spaces, but not actually updating the memo or the report?
My understanding is, thank you for the question, my understanding is that this addendum will form part of the parking study. And that parking study, we know, will be referred to in the future. And so yes, I'm seeking that the numbers in this addendum be updated, reflecting those additional parking spaces. So can we do that, or does Watt have to do it because it's their document?
Quite frankly, I think that if we were going to request that Watt modify the addendum, they should be doing the parking count rather than staff. So I think we have to reflect that as part of the cost.
Thank you.
Okay, so my question through the chair to staff is, do we need a motion with regards to budget? I think when we requested this additional information, we were provided an estimate figure by staff, but I don't think we passed a resolution on a figure. Council was understanding if the motion was passed, that there would be a cost associated with it.
Through to Mayor McNeil Smith, there was a motion adding additional budget previously that was made. That budget was used for this parking analysis, as well as the one that will be coming forward through with the ATP. We haven't received an actual invoice, so we haven't confirmed how much they've actually spent to date, but we could get those numbers and report back.
Okay, thank you. If I could amend my motion to add and approve additional budget, since we don't know the amount.
The seconder would agree to that as a friendly amendment as opposed to seeking us to vote on it as an amendment, if the chair is comfortable with that.
Fine with that.
So could you just repeat the entire motion
Yeah.
then at this point?
Sorry, could staff read it back if they have it?
I would appreciate it if the mayor was able to. I have that council requests that Watt update the analysis to show the commercial parking spots, and I missed the streets between Oakville and Bevan, and add and approve the budget for.
Between Oakville and Bevan on 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th streets with additional budget.
Do you wish for staff to read back now that she's got it, just to see? Or were you comfortable?
I'm comfortable,
You're comfortable with what you got?
with that,
Okay.
and if the chair
Okay.
agrees with that as a friendly amendment, then
Councillor
second
Garnett would
motion
like
first.
to hear the motion read back as well, actually.
That council
Thank
requests
you.
that Watt update the analysis to show the commercial parking spots on the streets between Oakville and Bevan on 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 5th streets with additional budget. There might be a couple too many streets in there, but I'll fix that.
Mayor McNeil Smith seems that was adequately captured as far as he understood. Okay, Councillor Garnett, is this I guess, a question through staff still? Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, thank you, Chair. So would at some point in time we see, before this, I'm trying to figure out whether this moves forward without knowing a budget. So would a report come back from staff indicating no? So we're approving something with an unknown budget. Okay, thank you.
Mayor McNeil Smith, did you want to address that? No.
No, I just say we asked for much more than this with the last motion for council, and we weren't aware of the exact budget. We were given an estimate by staff, but compared to the work that's been done, I can't see this being a significant item.
No, staff has nothing to add to that. Councillor Novak, did you have your hand up? Yeah, go ahead.
Just a comment, since Watt had already proposed to reduce the parking time on 1st and 2nd Street all the way down to Oakville, perhaps they already have those figures and it may not be such a big deal.
Go ahead, Ms. Clary.
Through to Councillor Novak, they will have the numbers. It's just a matter of updating the table and the graph. Those will be the more, it won't be super time consuming, but those will be the more time consuming things, not actually counting the parking spaces. It'll be the graph and the table associated with them.
So the data is there, it's simply a matter of incorporating it into the addendum, which doesn't sound to me like it would be a super onerous project.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on this one? All right, I'll call the question. All in favor? Yeah, unanimous. So we'll get all of the data out of that report that we can. All right, thank you. No more motions arising? No. All right, then the last item on our agenda is adjournment. Can I get a motion? Got a motion? Seconder, all in
Second.
favor? Okay, thank you, everybody.